Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat. I am your host, and welcome to this week's episode where we are having a very important conversation with my friend and holistic pelvic physical therapist, Brittney Ehlers. And I'm hopping on the intro this week just to give you a little forewarning as to what you're going to hear in this week's episode. And we have to give a little bit of a trigger warning because in Brittney's work and just the flow of the conversation, we get into a lot of what and how sexual trauma, abuse, and assault can show up in the pelvic floor, in your nervous system, how to navigate it, and sharing personal stories about our own experiences with these kinds of traumas. And so I invite you into an open heart and an open mind this week as you listen to some of the taboo and kind of societally shamed topics that we discuss. And I say all of that because I can just feel that there's parts of the conversations that we have that aren't being spoken about on a widely viewed platform. You know, the beauty of having Brittney on is giving her the platform to have a voice to talk about the things that we think women could be having more normal and healthier, secure conversations around. So as we get into this week's episode, like I said, a bit of a trigger warning for you, but also if you can stick around, and if this is not triggering for you, an open heart and an open mind, because you'll walk away from this episode really feeling educated and hopefully empowered to be a female in your body, to understand how the female anatomy works and why it's so important to know, and how to navigate things if you're in menopause or pre or postpartum, if you suffer from things like PCOS or endometriosis or just painful periods. Someone like Brittney could be a really awesome tool in your back pocket. So with that, let's get into the episode. Everyone, please help me welcome my friend, Brittney Ehlers, holistic pelvic physical therapist, to the Heal with Kat podcast. Thanks for being here, Britt.
Thanks for having me, Kat.
I'm so excited for this conversation because we got a little taste of, or I guess your audience got a little taste of our vibe, our conversations together on your podcast, episode number 63, which we'll put in the show notes below if anyone wants to listen to that conversation. It was really profound. That was the kickstart of a friendship in the making, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so excited to have you on Heal with Kat because what you do in your work is so deeply important for women. And I think it can be such a taboo topic that I wish more women were comfortable talking about. So the listeners, like, I'm at the edge of my seat. What is it? Tell us a little bit about what you do and your story with how you got into this amazing work.
Yeah. So you said it already. Basically, I'm a holistic pelvic physical therapist. I like to differentiate myself a little bit these days, calling myself the therapist, because we're reclaiming that word and that energy. And it's a little different than saying like yoni practitioner, you know? I mean, I do have like a yogi background, so Sanskrit is in my wheelhouse, but like not completely, if that makes sense. So yeah, my story. Oh my gosh. I was just an outpatient ortho clinical physical therapist back in the day. And I was one day before work thinking I needed to have a little self-pleasure session.
Oh, I love
And
that.
so,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
I was like, ooh, I got the urge, and I'm spontaneous like that. So it'll happen. And my typical back then was just to use a vibrator for about 5-10 minutes. I'd get off and then get going. I did that time. And gosh, I was 26, 27. And I went into work feeling actually like a lot of pelvic pain after that. And I felt like I had to go to the bathroom every 1 to 2 minutes. And that day I was working with patients, and I just remember sitting in, like, we have these little cages for stretching, and I'd sit on the little platform with my heel plugging up my pelvic floor to help just squash that feeling of having to go to the bathroom while I was like giving instructions to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it got so bad. Like, I'd go to the bathroom, I'd try to pee, nothing would come out, maybe like a couple of drips, and the pain still lingered. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, I don't understand. And I ended up telling my boss, who was a male at the time. He was very gracious and was like, go home, go figure this out. Like, you can't be working like this, obviously. And I was actually really lucky. I was working on a pelvic physical therapist at the time. She was my patient. So I gave her a call and I was like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I did. What do you think? Should I come see you? And she was like, actually, no. I think what you need to do is just downregulate your nervous system, maybe go have another orgasm, but this time, like, breathe very deeply. Like, you know why? Like, you teach yoga too. And if you can, just relax. Like, if you can just enjoy your orgasm, don't rush out of the room, like, stay in bed. I think you'll be okay. And I did that. And I was actually totally fine. I realized though that number one, the work environment that I was in at the time wasn't for me. It was seeing a lot of people energetically. It was a lot. It was like my first year and a half of working as a physical therapist. And I noticed that I started carrying a lot of my stress in my pelvic floor, which actually a lot of women do. At that point, I was starting to like work in people's homes and doing more of like a private practice with someone else. And I started leaning more into like my curiosity about having been on hormonal birth control off and on for 10 years, 3 different kinds. At the time, I was on the patch and I just was getting very, very curious. My friend just handed me this book called Woman Code, and she's like, you have to read this. She's also a pelvic physical therapist, someone I went to school with. And I read that and just realized I needed to know what my menstrual cycle was like without having any kind of internal, external change, you know? And so I weaned myself off birth control and I got my period back. It's been back ever since. No missing periods. Two periods I'd say that were just like a little bit off and not the ruby crimson red that I really like. And that was around the pandemic. So that makes sense. Stress really obviously impacts your not just like physical pelvic floor muscles, but also your menstrual cycle. And yeah, I just remember being also in like one other significant thing that really like pushed me towards all of this was a talk that I went to in Encinitas where I was living at the time. It was with Kimberly Ann Johnson, who's the author of The Fourth Trimester and multiple other books. And I remember her telling and talking about a lot of her clients who were all women and talking about the intersection of women, medicine, and power and how often women were really just like suffering, whether it was from sexual abuse and recovering from that, trauma of any kind, birth, postpartum, and just not receiving the care that they really deserve and need. And I was sobbing at that talk. And I was still, again, a clinical outpatient ortho therapist. And I was like raising my hand, what can I do to help? Like, what do you think? I'm already a PT, but I want to do something different. And she was like, well, if you have the chops, go into pelvic PT. And so a few months later, I signed up for my first course for that. And then I have not looked back since.
Well, what I love is that you have such a personal story to it. And I love the vulnerability that you share in that experience you had before work, because I think there's so many women who use something like an orgasm or sexuality as a means to get a quick fix for something and then like keep moving or get like a little high and like keep going about their day. And so I think it's a really relatable story because we aren't taught that something like that is so sacred. And it is, and how our body responds to that kind of pleasure can be a reflection of our internal world and what's going on. And so to be more present with it, I'd love for you to talk about that connection between the womb and the nervous system, because we know that the nervous system is something everybody is talking about these days. But how are we talking about it in relation to women's health with their pelvic floor and their womb?
Well, it's really so interesting, right? Safety is a big one. It's a big tie. And I think if you think about the phrase, which actually I draw back from yoga, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Like how you move on your mat is how you move off the mat. And for example, with me, something so regular and so normal at the time was like a 5-minute release. And yeah, just like literally scratching the itch, getting off and going on with my day. It was like my body realizing or telling me, this is not the way. This is not how we're doing this. And there's something deeper here maybe we get to explore. But what I'm noticing in my practice and with myself, it's like safety is kind of I think, the missing piece, which it also sounds very boring when you think about something as exciting as sex sometimes.
Yeah.
But truly, it is the foundational layer that I think a lot of us need to get to. But then having had potentially like those experiences that I talked about, right? The non-safety that comes with sexual abuse, violence, war, trauma, medical trauma, birth. And I'm purposely not adding like birth to trauma together, because to me, birth isn't always inherently traumatic, but sure, there can be some times where that is a traumatic experience. Like you're receiving that as trauma, right? But really trauma, right? Like I'm sure you talk about it all the time on your podcast and Gabor Mate's work and all of that. It's like the trauma isn't like a thing that's stuck in you. It's just like you have to move it and you have to complete the cycle, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes for women, it's like in their bodies, there are emotions that have been stuck. There have been conversations that have never been had. And there are, like physical movements that never got to be asserted or completed because of freeze, flight, fawn. And so part of my work is, I work in my sunroom. It's not like a clinical, it's quite the opposite, meant to feel like a comforting, familiar, homey space. Because a lot of the times I know, like, I'd probably say like 50% of the women I work with have white coat syndrome.
What? Oh, tell us what that is.
Just like heart rate raising, like all of a sudden losing your voice and not being able to advocate for yourself because, you're in a room with someone who's quote unquote more educated than you. And I get that because you think that they know more and they know what's right. And we hear all the time, like, trust the doctors, trust the nurses, like, listen to them. But also, like, let's listen to your body. What is she saying? And so here, I do work that's actually very reparative. And I don't think people realize that that's what's sometimes happening is like, I go so slow to the point of, I'm talking to them throughout the thing. Like, I don't want them to disassociate. And if they do, it's okay. Like, we can come back, right? But we go so slow so that they have the chance to maybe speak up for themselves. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. Even if someone signs up for a pelvic floor evaluation and they're like ready to get naked and show me all the things and grab the mirror and point things out to me, I'm like, okay, hang on. Like, how are you really? How is your nervous system? Like, are you chit-chattering, like trying to move through the thing and just get it over with, similarly to how, again, a lot of people experience or do sex with themselves or with a partner. Is it unsafe to slow down? Interesting. Where did we learn that?
Yeah. And I what you're saying makes me think of two things. The first thing is Dr. Gabor Mate says that sometimes memories are emotions. Sometimes our memories aren't an actual memory that we're going to have. Sometimes the memory is just the emotion. Often when we were in a freeze mode and we didn't have the words to say what we wanted to say, but we had the emotions with it. And that's not just pre-verbal, like under 3 years old type of stuff. That's like 10 years old and a sexual trauma, and you don't have the words to say no, but your body is saying no, right? Which leads me to my second question. Let's clarify for the listener, what does a pelvic physical therapy session look like? Take us through why somebody would want to rush through it, or why they might be nervous, or why are they getting naked?
Well, so you mentioned it, right? Like, it's taboo. It's been taboo for a long time. Thanks to culture, thanks to religion, it's a lot of times just how we were raised. But I feel like on the flip side, something so taboo can also be seen as very sacred. In my practice, I work a little differently. I still will do like, I'll call it an evaluation or an initial session. And really the first 15 minutes, because I like to spend at least an hour. It's likely that it's 75 minutes. Depending on the client, it might go up to 90 minutes for initial. But that first 15 minutes is really just trying to get an understanding of what they're there for. Are they there because they are leaking when they jump? Did they just have a birth and they're just curious about how their body's recovering? Are they trying to work through anorgasmia? Are they trying to work through painful sex and they have a loving partner and they can't just figure it out together? Do they believe that parts of them are broken and they just want to know what's going on? Do they have problems with, honestly, pee, poop, or sex? Birth, of course, menstrual cycle. So let's call it blood as well.
Pee, poop, blood, sex. Yeah, but these are things that women go through every day and they don't talk about it.
Right.
They're not having conversations about it because they're ashamed or they think it's weird or other people are going to think they're weird. But I think it's almost more weird to not ask for help or ask for the questions, but I can understand why people wouldn't. And there's a lot of trauma behind that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot there for sure that we can dig into if we want to. But yeah, the evaluation then can take a little turn. And I don't know, like maybe you find this too in your sessions. I get women who all of a sudden are just like telling me all their secrets.
Yes, I have some
Yes,
secrets that will go to the grave with me.
for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, obviously like HIPAA for me is a thing and I want to respect everyone's stories. And I feel like women, if they only knew what was being shared in my sessions, which I try to share obviously super anonymously, like I don't give away any details of who's who unless they've, been on my podcast or something like that and they've openly shared themselves. But if only they knew what these other women were experiencing, they'd see themselves in these women and wouldn't feel so alone. And
Mhm.
that's part of the work for sure is lifting the veil a bit. But I like to, of course, like people come to me because they're like physical therapists, like let's do physical. And so we do a bit of screening for movement if they do have physical pain. But again, a lot of the times physical pain isn't coming from the tissues, it's coming from somewhere else.
Mhm.
Maybe it is an emotion that feels energetically trapped and doesn't have a place to go and it's causing physical stagnation or stickiness. And I can feel that with their tissues. I can see it in the patterns in the ways that they move. So I will do a movement screen. I'll have them do some movements themselves and then move them myself if it's called for. If again, like they're there because they do want an internal pelvic examination and a checkup, then we'll do that. And again, I'll take my time with it. I don't rush that process. And, it's very unlike a gynecological OB situation where, people are putting things in you without necessarily telling you and you're in complete control.
Yeah.
And I will
Yeah.
not roll my eyes at you if you're like, stop.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking like we're so open, or maybe we're rather more open to go into a doctor's office, spread our legs and let someone stick this metal rod inside of us and like swipe our cervix and just be like, "Okay, and bye." But people are so weird about going to someone's office like you and like going in and like being really vulnerable about their experience. Like, why do you think people are more willing to go to this white coat who's like checking off a box rather than going to someone who can actually feel them and hear them and treat them more humanely than a doctor might? And I say might because not every doctor's like that.
Correct. I feel like there are a couple words coming to mind, and one is just conditioning and familiarity. Another one is responsibility and the willingness to feel seen. I think a lot of women are number one conditioned to not listen to themselves, not feel seen. So we're used to that. Sometimes we're used to feeling invisible and like driven over in a way.
Yeah.
And so to actually be with someone who will like lock eyes with you while they're internally with you, it can feel really intense. And it is. And so I'm not saying it's easy by any means and it's not always what has to happen. I mean, I know a lot of people who, for example, will need to close their eyes to feel safe or to like be able to tap into what they are experiencing in their bodies. But I know they're with me because they're talking to me. But yeah, there's a specific kind of woman who ends up coming into my office, and she is someone who steps into that responsibility for herself. She's willing to take some ownership in her healing. And that's why I'm like, I don't necessarily call myself a healer these days anymore. To me, it's a collaboration. You are the healer. You have an internal physician who's already doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think there's a tendency towards homeostasis wherever that lies for you. And like the body will find the path of least resistance, to be honest. And sometimes that path is like a little painful or it causes a little crick here and there. So if we want to readdress that and find a better homeostasis, like that's what we do together.
And what are these women coming to you receiving? What are they experiencing as a result of all the kinds of different pelvic therapy that you do? Is it just emotional? Is it emotional and physical? Is it It's hard to like, I don't want to put expectations on what somebody, will feel in a session because it's so different. But what are you noticing the most of? Hey everyone, Kat popping in during the episode today to share that I have something so exciting to announce. I just launched a brand new series of meditations on Insight Timer, the world's #1 meditation app with over 31 million users. I'll be releasing 10 new meditations every month now through August. And the best part? They're totally free, including downloading the app. The guided meditations on Insight Timer aren't just about ancestral healing. They're designed to help you understand how inherited patterns, pain, fears, or choices show up in your everyday life, your relationships, your self-worth, parenting experiences, or even your health. Each one gently helps you untangle those threads so you can move forward feeling more grounded, clear, and connected. Just download the Insight Timer app, search my name, Kat Dow, or click the link in the show notes below. Make sure you're subscribed to my email newsletter to get updates every month on the new meditations coming to your phone soon. All right, let's get back to the episode.
I think it's a little bit of both emotional and physical. And that's been happening since I started this work, I feel like. I mean, I'm more attuned to noticing it now. Like, I do mix in some craniosacral and somato-emotional release, and I do that while I'm internal with someone. I take people through visualizations and guided meditations that are specific for them. And what I notice is just a groundedness release, whether that's like an emotional release, crying, big sighs, exasperations, or just actual release of any physical pain or tension. Like, there's a melting that happens in here where, like, when you think of for example, a scared dog will tuck its tail, right? It kind of like rounds its body and it hides its belly. It's kind of the same with us. Like, our animal body instinct is to do that as well. And that, of course, will impact your tailbone, which impacts your pelvic floor, which causes a lot of tension and tightness, and maybe the inability to have a good bowel movement or a complete bowel movement, or to have an orgasm that feels all the way from head to toe, or to actually release your bladder fully, to take a full breath, which impacts a lot of other things too. So when someone can release that posture and feel into more of their fuller alignment, heart up, long spine, feet really grounded, I think they walk about the world a little differently. I would say better. And I mean, I get messages after the fact and they just feel more in touch with themselves. They feel, like I said, grounded, more relaxed, I feel like just tuned in to what their next moves could be if they're working on the edge of a transition. And I feel like actually a lot of times people are coming in with big transitory experiences. So that could be periods, having sex for the first time. Like, I work with a lot of like 20 somethings. Maybe it's post surgery, maybe it's after giving birth or their first pregnancy, or you know what I mean? Or they're going through perimenopause, or they're moving states, or they're changing jobs, they're releasing identities.
Mhm.
The body, to me, is a complete map for what's going on the outside world.
Yeah. And in terms of the nervous system, I know this, that people who have like hunched over shoulders or like hump backs, like they have like that raised hump in their back, that's
Mhm.
years of their nervous system shutting down and like their body literally folding over to hide themselves from the world, which has made me think of when you said the dog thing. It's like all this part of us were just like turning in on each other out of shame or out of fear or out of, just this sense of unsafety or instability in the world. And so how beautiful that you can give, especially women, this ability to stand tall again and have an open heart and be in their spine and be in their body and be in their feet and really like be in their existence, like to be fully here. You touched on something a little bit earlier that I would love to go into a little bit more if you feel comfortable. I know there's a statistic like 1 in 4 women will suffer some kind of sexual trauma or abuse before the age of 18. I have goosebumps. It's all too common. And so I'm just curious if there's somebody listening in this kind of female oriented community who suffered a sexual trauma of some kind, and we don't need to label what it is, just all kinds, what would something like this help give them, and what would it do for them?
I'm getting a little emotional, and I'll just share, like, I've never been, well, I shouldn't say never, but I haven't had some of the sexual assault experiences that many of my clients have had. I have been, transgressed before. And I don't necessarily need to talk about it right now. It's not a big deal, but like, so it's funny. We do that. We say, oh, it's not a big deal. Or we push it down to forget it because it is a big deal and we don't want to have to deal. I feel like a phrase that keeps coming up in more recent sessions is reclaiming your erotic innocence. And unfortunately, for a lot of women, their first time was taken from them without their permission. And I feel like my space can be a space where they get to reclaim that fully, express any kind of healthy, sacred rage, which they're fully, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm on my period, so like little loss of words sometimes.
Like a permission, like a full allowance to just like let it out.
Yes, yes. They're fully allowed to do that fully. I've had clients on my table just absolutely raging, like curled over, yelling at whoever they need to. Whether that it was even like the person who did it, the parent who didn't know and probably should have themselves sometimes. Like sometimes there's a layer of addiction that goes into these kinds of situations. And so like it's okay to express that. I'd say it's worse to harbor it, but it's unfortunate that underneath all of this, it's like there is just a big layer of grief, and that has to come through, honestly.
Yeah, I'll open up and share about something personally that happened to me. I think we talked about this one-on-one before, but I went through something at 15 years old that I was conscious was happening, but when I went back and reprocessed the memory, I absolutely never wanted that to happen. It was such a complicated scenario, so many different layers and emotions to it. I had never considered it to be a sexual trauma because I essentially said yes to some extent. And my therapist was like, that is absolutely a sexual trauma. And just because you said yes doesn't mean you actually wanted it. We need to look at the other ways, the other parts of you that were coming up in that situation. And for me, when I was reprocessing my sexual trauma at 15, I got to reclaim the part of me that said no. And I don't want this to be happening right now. And my body is literally telling me this is not right, but my brain is telling me I really just want attention from someone. And being able to hold space for all of those emotions. And the reason I share this is for the listener who is listening and could be struggling with making sense of their own sexual trauma. You can still, quote unquote, agree to something and it still be traumatic for you. I was 15. There's no way I should have been doing what I was doing. And yet there was a desperate, wounded part of me that just wanted some love and affection. And I did it in a way that stuck with me for years. And I'm 34 and only dealing with this now. So to add to what you're saying, there is so much importance in the complexity of what you go through, that every sexual trauma is not a black and white statement. It's not a this happened and that means therefore that this was the reason. It's not like that. Trauma is chaotic, it's confusing. And also the way our bodies interpret what's happening, even after the trauma occurs, is really important for us to look at. So I just really admire the work that you're doing and love your tears and love your heart and love that you can hold space for that complexity for people who are just trying to figure out what the hell they went through.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like there's yeah, again, like you said, so many layers and so many pieces that make experiences like that feel chaotic. And I think actually one that comes through a lot here for me is when it happens, like whatever age, honestly, like from as young as 3 years old to whatever age, 20s or 30s, it's like there's confusion because number one, maybe what's happening actually did feel good to the body, but didn't feel right to the brain.
Yes. Yes.
And you're like, wait, what? Like, this is where the reclaiming the erotic innocence, like, there's an innocence in like why that felt good. And second is like the coherence or incoherence from like what's happening in your brain to what's actually occurring in your body, like your thinking mind and your body having its own response. Like, there are lots of women out there who probably have sex with partners that they love, but they don't want to have sex at the time. And yet the partner is noticing, oh, you're wet. And it's like, oh, you're aroused. Oh, you want this. And it's like, well, mentally, maybe not,
Mhm.
but my body is like saying yes. So maybe I'll go with it. But maybe that didn't feel very good actually after we were done. And so there's, yeah, the grief, the considerations for all of these things that our body does and then what our mind has to go through. What does a full, I hate the phrase now, like, what does a full body yes feel like? But what does it feel like? What does a partial yes feel like? How does the body actually mirror that or respond to that? What happens first, your body saying yes or your mind saying yes? Have you explored either way? Does it work both ways for you? And yeah, I feel like that's an interesting piece. Like, that's part of the education and experimentation that gets to happen through this work.
And I think you touched on something too, which is so fascinating about sexual trauma is that it feels good, but it feels wrong at the same time. And how do you navigate a complexity like that a in childhood, at 10, at 15, I mean, even as an adult? How do you make sense of those? So I love these empowering words that you're giving us right now of like, if it's maybe even a little bit of a no, pause,
Mhm.
figure out why, and like check in with yourself. This used to kind of like, and this is really vulnerable for me to say, but like when I was a lot younger, like in college, I didn't really understand the whole like consensual thing because I was just like, well, if my body wants it, that must mean that I want it. And I look back on so many years and I'm like, no, like there's so much. It's not just consent with the other person, it's consent with yourself of
Mhm.
like, okay, if I'm being honest with myself, like it's a no. And how do I like say, and I'm not in this situation now, but like, how do I wish I would have been able to say to myself in college or even younger, like, how do I say no and not worry so much about disappointing the other person versus all of the years I disappointed myself and I wasn't in an authentic alignment with myself.
Exactly. Exactly. You nailed that. I feel like I, in the last year, recently came to terms with all of those times back when I first started having sex at 18, through college and even through past partners and even my partner now. Like, I feel like I'm even more in alignment with him. Like, we've been together for almost 5 years now, and but last year we'd gone through like a rupture where emotionally I didn't feel like I wanted to have sex. It's really interesting and funny to say that as someone who preaches like sexuality and
But it's
like, know your
honest.
stuff.
You're
It's
still a
very
human.
honest. Exactly. I'm still a human, and this is all learning that I'm here to share my experiences too, when it's time and when it's ready. And I recently felt like it was time to share this story because yeah, like, I mentally was thinking, after we'd done a lot of work on ourselves, solo and together, to emotionally come back to a place where I felt like I was ready to engage again.
Mhm.
And I was like mentally just so there, like, thought so at least. And, we set up this whole me night, which is something that we do where it's like focus on one person, whatever they really desire. And it's a practice, right? Of like naming your desire and then the person saying yes, and then the person giving it to you, and then you actually receiving it. And it's kind of I don't know, it can be a nuanced thing, right? Depending on your history. And I remember asking for a massage and getting a massage full body on my back. And he was doing a great job. I felt really relaxed, really good. He told me to flip over so he could do my front. And as soon as I flipped over, I was like, no, shut down.
Yeah.
Dog body curl. Like, my breasts, my heart, like everything just felt way too exposed, way too vulnerable to feel seen. And I knew something was off. I couldn't name it yet. So I asked to slow down, and I asked for him to just like lay on top of me and give me that heaviness so I could ground. And we just took a few breaths together. And I realized after everything that we'd been through, I actually didn't want sex. Like, I didn't want like the sexual, juicy, primal energy. Like, I didn't necessarily even want to feel his desire towards me. What I really wanted to feel, which was the word that dropped in, was cherished.
Hmm.
Like, I wanted to feel so cherished by him. And he understood the assignment as soon as I said it.
What a man.
And what a man. Oh my God. Thank God this man can read me. Yeah, he ended up just like starting at my fingertips and just kiss all the way down my arm, my face, my body. And I mean, when I tell this story, I'm like, I remember it so vividly. But like as soon as he got to my collarbone, I was sobbing again.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
in just the reception of it, but then coming to grips and coming to terms with all the times that I wasn't ever able to name that out of fear of rejection, out of fear of being laughed at, out of fear of if I don't do this or if I don't go through with this, I'm going to be left. I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be punished,
Yeah.
not loved, essentially, is the main fear.
I mean, how many women feel that way? And thank you for sharing that experience with your man, because it's that intimacy that into me I see, just to be able to share that honesty with each other. And I think people in relationships like take notes, because that, you don't have to do the exact same thing that Brittney did, but it's that letting your guard down and seeing that you can feel exposed in a relationship, and it doesn't mean that you're unsafe. Granted, there are situations where that's true, but if you're in a healthy or secure or loving relationship, it's okay to feel a little bit exposed at times, because it could be that there's an opportunity for deeper connection there. And also not just with the other person, but with yourself too.
Percent. I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Why do you think, as women, and you know what, I'm actually going to say, I've had a few instances with male clients that feel that they hold a lot of tension in their like genitals or in their, in their pelvis. They have a pelvis too, right? Obviously.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know the anatomy, but why do you think so many humans carry so much stress in this part of our body?
Well, for a multitude of reasons, like anatomically, this is our seat. Just culturally, what we're doing these days, we are sitting. So there's a lot of stagnation that happens there. We're not moving as often. So, not just physically, but energetically, there is a lot of stuckness. And from the like an energetic side, root chakra stuff, like this is our foundation and places that we can tap into our security, our foundation, our money. Like, I mean, think of families and think of where you came from. Like, this is literally the portal. I mean, whether you were born cesarean like I was, or, and like you were, right?
I was too, yeah.
Yeah.
But
It
the root
doesn't,
chakra is where conception happens, right? Or no, is that the sacral?
sacral.
But you come through technically the root.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to go back to that and like think about your family, think about how you were brought onto this planet, like there could be some things there for you. But specifically for men, I feel like there's a lot of conversation right now around how men do things, right? How they do one thing is how they do everything. So I feel like actually I've used this analogy before just in like private conversations with my friends who are, in the space. And it's hard for me to name it sometimes because I don't want anyone to feel shame necessarily, but rather I want to offer this as like an opportunity to look at yourself a little more deeply. Vibrators are to women what porn is to men.
Whoa, that's a big statement, because it's quick and it's dirty and it's kind of disposable.
Yeah. It's like a cheap trick.
Mhm.
It can be. It could also be potentially like a cherry on top of a really great, loving, expansive situation, right? Just like AI, honestly. I heard someone say it like this and it makes sense. Like AI can be a tool and it's integrated into our lives in a multitude of ways that you might not even be aware of.
Mhm.
But really, the integrity of it is with the user. So, as the user, use wisely. Is it causing actually more distress and more pain or more dysfunction in men to use porn? I believe so, in the ways that we're seeing it being used right now.
Do you think women use porn the same way that men do?
I think they can. Yeah. So I don't want to necessarily negate, or say that this is only a male problem, because I know a few females who have been or maybe still are addicted to porn
Mhm.
or use it.
Mhm.
And maybe they go towards like more of the female lens porn. And I think that's a great alternative to these other porn sites who, I mean, there's some deep, dark evils there.
Yeah, a lot of unrealistic expectations of what true intimacy and sexual connection can look like. I mean, it's there's a dark rabbit hole you can go down around trafficking and
Yes,
all of that. You never really know what you're watching, to be honest.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, like, yeah, watch what the mind does when you are looking for novelty.
And how do people navigate that? What if they are looking for novelty and they want to find something deeper? How would you suggest they start doing that?
Well, it's so funny because novelty can come in from a few different ways, right? If you just even want to think about your senses, what if you deprive your senses? What if you deprive your vision and lean more into what is actually happening in your body? What if you lean more into your physiology as a man or a female? I think what feels novel for people right now is actually the slowness. Like, I think I think the world's been talking about slowing down and living like the slow life and blah 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 blah. But like, have you applied that to your sex life?
Mm.
Have you applied that to your sexuality? Like, do you allow yourself with yourself to spend time? And I feel like that's probably new for a lot of people.
Think about how on social media we're always shown, life moves so fast and you got to regulate your nervous system, but no one's talking about it in terms of their sexual relationship with themselves or other people. And
Mm.
I think it could be that a lot of people use sex as like scratching an itch, and that's I think there's a time and a place for that, but like we're not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's like if you can bring a little bit more slowness and intention to scratching that itch, like how much more fulfilling it could be. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the keywords that I'm personally trying to integrate more of into my life is presence. Like, in all ways, it's the presence, it's the intention, it's the patience. Yeah, you're not wrong, because we talk about slowness and all that, right? And I think if you want to use your menstrual cycle as a menstruating woman to navigate the differences in your sexuality throughout the whole, say, month, right? That is a brilliant way, I think, of leaning into whether that's novelty, whether that's actually like going out on fun adventures and dates and just making it feel exciting, or you want to lean more into that slowness in your luteal phase, for example, where your body potentially needs more time
Mm-hmm.
because estrogen is dipping. So, like, what does it look like to spend? I don't even want to call it foreplay either,
Yeah.
right? Because that could be the main event. Like, what does your body actually want? Does it want penetration, or does it just want like a loving massage that feels really connected? Does it want a partner bath? Does it want solo time? Um, and then with periods, like, some people like period sex, some people don't, and none of it's wrong. But if you're someone, say, who has cramps and you are feeling like a little gremlin monster, sometimes that's me. Maybe she wants some like good rough penetration. Maybe she wants like that primal, like juicy sex. And if she doesn't want to have to do a cleanup, there are multiple ways around that. Obviously, shower, not everyone's favorite, but you know, period blankets, sex blankets, they're all a thing that you can use to your advantage that makes all of this exploration, I think, feel exciting.
And when you're working with women who have shame around these conversations or shame around sex or shame around their bodies, how do you usually navigate that conversation?
So I always say, and I'll remind people that I will go and they should go at the pace of the slowest part of them. So whether that's like an identity part, a thinking mind part, a physical body part that's not responding. If something shows up, they got to address it. We got to address it. And yeah, we'll take one step at a time with that. So
Everything that we've talked about on the podcast today has felt so warm and loving and safe. And I really appreciate you bringing so much security and stability to a conversation that can feel so altering and like earthquakey for people. So I just love your groundedness and your approach to all of this. I know that you have a community called Being Better, and it supports women through different life phases from menstruation to menopause, pre and postpartum care, to also pelvic pain resolution. So, how can people become a part of this community? What benefits are they going to receive from being a part of it? Do you do events? Like, can they get one on one time with you? What does that look like?
yeah, I mean, the community is like Being Better is the whole shebang, the whole company, but the community is for free. So you could pop in there. To be honest, it's not as active. I'd say what feels more active and alive right now is like the vaginal alchemy community.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that was something that I ran live a few times, and it was so amazing. I was leading women through these guided mapping sessions, and then they had a bunch of material to learn, whether that was about their cycle, about like the seasons of life and their sexuality, like how does arousal work, how does this work with their partners, how to incorporate it into a relationship. And it was, yeah, just so incredible. I ended up making it into a self-paced course, so someone could just like jump into that and work through that on their own. I did end up recently making it hybrid. So there is a monthly call where we get to be all together, whatever stage or whatever part of the course you're actually in. It doesn't matter. Your stage of life doesn't matter. You'll be welcomed. And there is an aspect of that with the VIP pathway. You can work with me one-on-one for 3 months, and we can get really, really deep and juicy. And of course, you're invited to the group calls as well. So it's kind of a blend and a mix, because I just like it like that. I feel like there are many things that we can all learn from each other. And I think every woman has a story or two to share wisdom from. And yeah, that's kind of where the juice is right now. It's kind of the flavor of the work is really just going again slow with the body, really integrating this pussy work and um, bringing it out into the rest of our lives and our embodiment, and yeah, just how we show up in the world.
I love that too, because I feel like, especially women who struggle with a mother wound, like other women aren't safe for other women. You know, there's just like these fears or these beliefs or these patterns that keep us separated from other women, and society has a lot to do with that too. So I love that you're bringing women into connection and conversation with each other, where it's like we can have these conversations that might feel a little sticky or might feel a little uncomfortable, but you're in the community, in the space with other women who've been there before, and maybe they've walked the path of now I'm comfortable talking about these things and these are the benefits that I've had. So I think I really want to like normalize that this conversation isn't like your everyday coffee chat, but it's an important one to have. And that's why we're having it on the podcast. That's why you have your own podcast, which I'd love for you to share as well. But before you share your podcast and how people can connect with you, aside from Woman Code, what's one other book that every woman should start with when they want to understand their pelvic health and how to take care of themselves as women?
Oh my gosh, that's really, really hard, because as you see, if you're watching this, I have a plethora of books.
Which I love. That was what made me think of it. I'm like, which one would she pick?
I'm like, okay, depending on what you're actually looking to learn about your pelvic health, because obviously that's a really broad topic. I feel like go to the Amazon page just as like a window shop. And if there's any title that really sticks out to you, let me know. I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what you're wanting to work on. Like that's the great book to start with first, for sure. Yeah. I'd love to hear what you're drawn to if you're someone who is a book reader like I am, but I like all the things.
Do you have an Amazon page? Is that what you're saying? You have an
Yes.
Amazon page of books? Okay. So
Correct.
we'll
Yeah.
email that to me. We'll link it in the show notes. And then we'll also link our conversation together, our podcast that we did on yours.
Yes.
Drop your podcast and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, the podcast is the Pelvic Pulse podcast. That is everywhere you listen. I just started putting the videos on YouTube, starting with season 2. So season 1 is everywhere else. And Yeah, I love the videos. I think it's so fun watching people. That's how I consume my podcast these days, is by like watching and listening at the same time. But yeah, you can connect with me on Instagram, TikTok, on through the podcast, or just email me, hello@wearebeingbetter.com. Drop me a hello. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, thanks for
Amazing.
having me, Kat.
Oh my God. Thanks for being on here and having this conversation. And guys, if you like what you heard this week, or you know someone this conversation can touch, don't forget to share it. Subscribe to the Heal with Kat community. We've got some fun announcements coming up in the next couple of months. And don't forget to rate and review it as well, because as always, I am in this community for you. Whatever y'all want to hear, I want to bring it to the table. So let me know what you guys want to hear next. All right. We'll see you next week on the Heal with Kat. Thanks.